Welcome to Music Theory class, everybody. This is lesson 6. Thank you for joining me. And today we're going to be looking at the circle of fifths or the circle of fourths, which you may also hear it referred to. But before I begin getting into the meat of the lesson, I want to show you all a resource that I recently found online. This is called the chord wheel, and it's the ultimate tool for all musicians, is what it says at the top, by Jim Flesser, and it is published by Hal Leonard. And the price on the back is $15.99. You might get $1 or $2 off depending where you go online. But I'm going to recommend this, and we will be looking at it later in the lesson as we get to covering the meat of the lesson. This is based on and built on the circle of fifths. And it's actually a softback book form, and the inside of it shows all the various uses for it, how to actually use it. There's pages here that explain everything to you, and the chord wheel itself is on the outside and it turns. We'll get back to this later after we cover a few other things. If you have not already done so, as I mentioned at the end of lesson 5, I asked you to go online and find a circle of fifths and download it. And I suggest that you download several copies. The reason for several copies would be so you can write notes on various pages and label them so you don't put all the notes on one page and get yourself confused. This is the one that I found online, and I suggest that whichever one you find online, that it has a dark outer circle with the key names and chord names on it, with an inner circle of minors and an outside edge possibly of showing you key signatures. This is at least the minimum of what you're going to be looking at. If you remember, when I showed you one of my Hannon books, I showed you the inside cover a few lessons back and showed you a wheel, the circle of fifths, and I mentioned to you that I didn't particularly like that one, and the reason I didn't was because it didn't have enough information on it. So get one with information on it. If you have not already done that, please pause the lesson here and go back online and look for a circle of fifths wheel that you can download and print out so that you have it to take notes on. Otherwise, you're going to have trouble writing everything down. The thing you're going to find about the circle of fifths is that it's kind of going to pull together all the information I was giving you in the previous 5 lessons, and it's going to pull it all together and show you how to use it or how to find those things using the circle of fifths. So if you are a new musician or a new theory learner, music theory learner, the circle of fifths will be a great boon or a great asset for you to understand and to use in everything you're doing musically. So please take care of that right now. If you haven't printed one out, pause the video and go find yourself a circle of fifths. Okay, let's get into looking at today's lesson. First question, what exactly is the circle of fifths? It can be defined as a circular chart, notice it's a circle, showing the relationships between the various keys, showing all 12 notes of the chromatic musical scale and how they relate to each other. Now, chromatic simply means playing every tone in the octave, either the whole keyboard or just one octave, considering of 12 different pitches. And this circle includes all 12 major and all 12 minor keys. Okay, and I'll show you on the keyboard. When you're talking chromatic, we mean and so forth and so on, up and down the whole scale. So if you were playing, perhaps if you were practicing a chromatic scale, you use the fingers 1 and 3, and you practice, you just play every note. That is the meaning of the word chromatic. Okay, so what can the circle of fifths do for you as a musician? First, it can tell you what key you are in. And for some of you, that has been a problem, knowing what key you are playing in. So I want you to think of the circle as a clock face, okay? The key of C is at the 12 o'clock position, if you see the big C. And as you move clockwise around the clock face, as you move to the right clockwise, okay, the 1 o'clock position is the key of G. The 2 o'clock position is the key of D. Now, as we start this way, we're going to see the sharp keys. If we go counterclockwise, we're going to see the flat keys. So first we start with C, which has no sharps and no flats. That's why we've used it as a reference key for everything. When we move to the 1 o'clock position, we find the key of G, and it has exactly one sharp. Notice the key signature. Written next to it here is the key signature of G with one sharp. As we move to the 2 o'clock position, one sharp, 2 o'clock position, two sharps, key of D, 1, 2, and it shows you the sharps again. As we move to the 3 o'clock position, the key of A, 3 sharps. As we move to the 4 o'clock position, the key of E, 4 sharps. Notice the key signature. As we move to the 5 o'clock position, the key of B, 5 sharps. Notice the key signature. As we move to the 6 o'clock position, the key of F sharp, 6 sharps. As we move to the 7 o'clock position, the key of C sharp, or 7 sharps. Now, if you're looking at the bottom of your wheel, you will see at the bottom these 3 keys, D flat, G flat, and C flat, and C sharp, F sharp, and B. They have 2 different designations. So why is that? These are called enharmonic. Enharmonic simply means that it sounds the same, but it's written differently. So when you reach down here and you're playing in the key of B, that can also be written as the key of C flat, and it shows it both ways here. But it will sound exactly the same. It will look differently on the music because it will be written in flats instead of sharps. The same thing here in G flat and F sharp. If you look on your keyboard and we see a G flat, which is also the same as an F sharp, okay? We see a B, which is also the same as a C flat. And we see a D flat, which is also the same as a C sharp. So we know the black keys can be one of 2 different notes. We know that's true of every black key. It can be either a flat or a sharp. But when we reach the bottom of the group here, we have the 3 enharmonic keys that will sound exactly the same, but will be written differently. It's kind of like, what is it called? A homonym, a word in the English language that sounds the same, but it is spelled differently and it has more than one meaning. It can be depending on what the spelling of the word is. This is the same thing in enharmonic. It sounds the same, but what we call this when it's written differently is the way the chord is spelled, or the way the key is spelled. The spelling of the key is what is important. To determine the name of the key, you look and see whether it has sharps or it has flats. Okay, so now as you move clockwise, we kept adding one more sharp as we went around. And so the clock face number actually corresponded to the number of sharps and flats. Time was 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock. This will help you as you look at the chord wheel. And if you already know, when you see the key signature like this one right here with 2 sharps in it, you see 2 sharps in your key signature, you have music in front of you, and you're wondering what key that is. Well, it's on the 2 o'clock position on the wheel. It tells you it's the key of D. So if you're on the wheel and you have the wheel with you and you're suddenly have a key signature of 4 sharps, oh my goodness, what key is that? Well, what's at the 4 o'clock position? 1, 2, 3, 4. The key of E. Okay, so it right there, it helps you to figure out what key you're in. Now, if you go counterclockwise on the chord and just do the same thing, but instead of making this 11 o'clock and 10 o'clock and 9 o'clock, do your numbers the same as you did over here. Do 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock. Just run it backwards. Okay, so you start here with at the F with 1 flat. At the 2 o'clock position, 2 flats, the B flat. 3 o'clock position, E flat, 3 flats. 4 o'clock position, A flat, 4 flats. This is 3 flats, 4 flats. 2 flats, 3 flats, 4 flats, 5 flats, 6 flats, 7 flats. Corresponding key signatures outside around the edge. So just count 1, 2 instead of using the numbers 11, 10, 9, etc. And you'll be able to figure out very quickly by looking at the wheel. If you have this wheel, a copy of the wheel, sitting on your piano or your keyboard or wherever you're working with your music, next to your music, keep it in one of your music books. You can always use it as a very quick reference if you're not familiar yet. You should get to the point where no matter what key you're in, you know how many sharps or flats are in that key. In the beginning, when you're new at this, you may find you really struggle to know the key signature. I mean, I had a friend in Bible college that I would say to her, "What key are you in?" She was playing piano and I was playing organ. I'd say, "What key are you playing in?" She'd say, "I don't know, it has 3 flats." But she didn't know that 3 flats was E flat, or it has 4 flats. She didn't know 4 flats was A flat. And why is this important? Why is it important that you know what key you're in? It may not bother you, or it may not seem important to you if you're just playing by yourself. But if you're part of a worship team, or you're part of a group, and say you're all getting together and you just want to hang out some night and you just kind of want to chill and just play your instruments, it kind of helps to know what key or mode you're in, to tell the other musicians, well, I'm going to be playing in C, or I'm going to be playing in F, or I'm going to be playing in G. Well, first of all, you have to know what key you're in to be able to tell other people what key you're in so they can play in the same key with you. Otherwise, to use a quote that we often say, you'll sound like a Chinese circus. I mean, that sounds like a negative connotation of Chinese music, but if you've listened to Asian music, you know it has a lot of parallel fourths, and fourths are, this is parallel fourths, which is not a common sound in American or Western music. We don't use a lot of parallel fourths. We don't do a lot of that. And the minute you hear those type of sounds, of those types of harmonics, you think Asian music. But you just don't want to be clashing by playing in different keys. One of you is in the key of B, one of you is in the key of A flat. That's really going to be, you're going to get into some really nasty chord connotations if you're not in the same key. Okay, in addition, and I will just show you what I marked on the first chord, is the first copy here. What I marked here, I narrowed off or lined off the B flat and the F, and I wrote under the F first sharp, and I wrote under the B flat first flat. So now, if you trying to figure out which notes are sharped and flatted, say you know you have 5 sharps, or you know you have 4 flats, or you know, but you just don't know which notes they are. Okay, so we're going to look over here at this part, and I lined this out because what happens here is that F will always be your first sharp, and the B flat will always be your first flat. So when you are in the key of G, you look over here, your first flat will your first sharp will always be F. Okay? If you're in the key of F, your first flat will always be a B flat. Okay, so now you figured out that the first sharp is going to be F. So you're going to start there and you're going to move clockwise around the circle for sharps. You're going to move counterclockwise around the circle for flats. Now, what am I talking about? So we know that the first sharp is going to be F, okay, which means we're in the key of G, which is 1 sharp. Now, as we move around the circle and we move to the key of D, which is 2 sharps. The next sharp will be the next note clockwise from the first one we started with, which was F. So if F was the first sharp, C is the second sharp, G is the third sharp, D is the fourth sharp, A is the fifth sharp, E is the sixth sharp, and B is the seventh sharp. So you're going to start back here. You've already figured out, if you've looked at this, that you're in the key of D. Okay, so we know it has 2 sharps because it's at the 2 o'clock position on the wheel. We want to know which notes those are. And as we said, the first sharp is always F. And we move clockwise around the circle to determine the next sharp, which is going to be C. So we have D, key of D. It has 2 sharps, F and C. And you can do that for every key as you go clockwise. You know the number of sharps and flats. This will determine which notes are sharped and which notes are flatted. If you're absolutely still unsure after you've figured out, let's say you figured out you're in the key of D and it has 2 sharps, and we're saying that by the chord wheel, it's showing you that those are F and C. Play the scale. There starts on D. D, E, we said F sharp, F, A, B, F, G, A, B, then we said C was the next one. Now if we played it without those, we'd have a minor scale, but we're trying to play the key of D. I think I have clumsy, stiff, arthritic fingers today. So anyway, you can always figure it out that way. Now, if you're going the other way and you're going with flats, you're going to go the opposite direction. Remember, we said we move the flat keys to the left, which is counterclockwise. We move the sharp keys to the right, which is clockwise. So the first flat is always going to be B flat, and that is the key of F. Remember the key of F shown here at the 11 o'clock or the 1 o'clock position going backwards. We said change your numbers to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so the first flat key is the key of F. So the first flat is always going to be a B flat. So as we move this direction, we say the next flat key is going to be a B flat key, which means it's at the 2 o'clock position. It has 2 flats, and the first flat is B flat. The second flat is E flat. So you can play that scale. Okay? And you go and so forth and so on to the left around the chord wheel to determine which notes are flat and which notes are sharp. Now in time, if you have been learning all your scales, which I recommend, no matter what instrument you play, whether you play a guitar, whether you play a wind instrument, whether you play the keyboard, you should learn all your scales, all 12 scales, all the 12 different keys. And as you learn your scales, you will automatically get to know which notes are sharped and which notes are flatted in each of the keys. Remember that this chord wheel or this circle of fifths is simply a tool to help you in the beginning sort out where these things are at. Now, I really have to confess to you, I've been playing the piano for 60 years, actually 60 years in church, actually more than 60 years. I never use the circle of fifths. Why do I not use the circle of fifths? Because I do not need it. It brings a lot of information to the beginning musician. But if you've been playing for as many years as I've been playing, I seldom use reference points for anything. I simply go there, and I know what key I'm in. I know how many sharps or flats are in it. I know what the major chords are in the keys. I know what the minor chords are. Therefore, as a reference tool, I do not use the circle. But for all of you starting musicians who are trying to find a way to put all this together to make sense, this is an absolutely phenomenal tool for you, and I highly recommend that you start out by using it as often as possible, because you will get information and help you to see it all together and how it all relates to each other. That's one of the great things about the circle, is that it kind of gives you an idea of how everything relates to everything else. Okay? Now, the particular copy that I downloaded, and you should have downloaded one the same way, has the relative minor keys displayed in the inner circle. We did a lesson on minor scales and the relative minor keys. And if you do not understand that, I forget which lesson it was, but you need to go back and find which lesson it is and do that lesson over if you are still confused about relative minor keys, which the relative major key, or if minor scales, the three minor scales. If you don't understand all that, please go back and do that lesson again. So now as you look at the chord wheel or the circle of fifths, on the inside circle, directly below each of the outside large letters, which indicate, in this case, we're talking about a key now, the key of C, the relative minor is A minor. If by chance you're playing in the key of A minor, you want to know the relative major, you just look above it on the chord wheel, and it will show you what the relative major is. So why is this important? Because remember, one of the things that these two share, the major and the relative minor, or the minor and the relative major, they share the same key signature. So if you're ever confused and you have a key signature of C, but somehow it doesn't sound like the key of C, there's a good chance you're probably in A minor because it's the relative minor. So as a quick reference point, so you don't have to be counting to find it, and I always count down. I count down my 4 anyway if I ever a question. That's why I don't use the wheel, because I can find it other ways. But if you're ever at a question, look at the circle of fifths, look at your inner circle of the relative minors, and you'll know the related major key. Okay? Okay, the next thing it's going to help you do is find all 6 major and minor diatonic chords in any given key. Now, diatonic is a term referring to the natural steps of any scale when you don't add any sharps or flats that are not already in that scale or key. So if you're using the key of C, the C scale, that's simply going to be a C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. And the diatonic scale of any other key will also simply include all of the sharps and flats that are in the key signature of that key. Okay, so now, as we discussed in a previous lesson, you can build a chord on the diatonic note. Each diatonic note of a scale can have a chord built on it. So in any given key, we can find, using this, what the chords are in that key. Now, first of all, I'm going to jump ahead because I think this should be the next thing. You're going to quickly find the 4 and the 5 chord of each key. So I want you to look at the C at the top. Okay? Now, to find the 4 and the 5, you're going to group these 3 together. To the left will be the 4 chord. To the right will be the 5 chord. And that is true all the way around the wheel. If you go to the key of G, to the left, it has the C chord and a D chord. That's your 4 and your 5. The key of D has a G and an A. You go this way, if you're in the key of F, the 4 chord is a B flat, the 5 chord is a C. There's 3 group. You group those 3 together. That gives you your 1 chord, which is named for the key. In the key of C, your 1 chord is a C. Your 4 chord is an F. Your 5 chord is a G. In the key of G, your 1 chord is a G. Your 4 chord is a C. Your 5 chord is a D. This is true all the way around the wheel, regardless of where you are. So if you're in say you're in a given key, and you have not yet, I told you some time back, make a cheat sheet with all the listing of all the 1, 4, and 5 chords in each key. If you haven't done that, or you haven't already got it memorized, or you don't have it grooved into your brain yet, you can use the wheel, the circle of fifths, to find the 1, 4, and 5 of every key. So say you're in the key of E flat, which has 3 flats Here's your key signature. And you're like, okay, what are my 4 and 5 chords in this key? Just look at the letter to the right and to the left, and you've got them. So you have E flat, 1 chord, A flat, 4 chord, B flat, 5 chord. It's right there on the wheel. It's kind of like a built-in cheat sheet. And this also works on the inner part, which is the relative minor. So if you're in like A minor, your main chords are D minor and E minor. It's going to be D and E. But just remember that for harmonic purposes, when we are, remember, because there are 3 minor scales, for harmonic purposes, they always make the 5 chord a major. So if you're in the key of A, you have A minor, D minor, which is 4, and then if you had the natural minor, you would have this, but because you're using the harmonic minor for the chords and all of the harmonics in the key, it simply becomes an E major instead of an E minor. That's the only difference. You raise the third 1/2 step. Now, if I just lost you, go back and do the study or the lesson on the relative minors and the 3 different minor scales, which were very important to learn so that you would know the use of those scales. And we use the harmonic minor with the chords in it to harmonize the relative minor keys. So just be aware of that. Okay, so that was the first part, finding the 4 and the 5. But let's look beyond that. Here is another, and you can mark this on your circle of fifths, okay? Let's start here. What you're going to look at, we're looking for a grouping of actually 7 chords, because remember, there are 7 tones in the scale. The 8th one is a repeat of the first. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We want to know the chords in any given key, and the wheel or circle of fifths will show us how to find that. So we're going to start with C because that's the one we've been using. So we know the C was the 1, we know the F was the 4, and we know the 5 was the G. So we had the 1, 4, and 5 chords. So now we have 3 more minor chords plus a diminished chord. So let's work our way around the scale, around the circle rather, okay? So the next three names, which is D, A, and E, are the 3 minor chords in that key. Because remember, every key has 3 major chords, 3 minor chords, and 1 diminished chord with, without changes. But when we did that, and they're built on the tones of the scale. So in the key of C, the 3 major chords are grouped together right here, F, C, and G. And they're the 1, 4, and 5. The 3 minor chords are grouped together. They will be D, A, and E. And then the diminished chord will be the next one, which is B. Okay? So you can do this regardless of where you move. Just kind of create another 6. In other words, we moved over here to the key of G. Okay, so we're going to have the chords C and D. Now we need 3 more. A, E, B, and your diminished chord is going to be an F sharp chord. Okay? You can do the same thing the other way. So it will help you find all the major, minor, and the 1 diminished chord in any key. Okay, and here we just kind of mark. So you can take one of your other copies and you can kind of outline that if you want to and mark this off as your majors, mark these 3 off as your minors, and the next one as your diminished. You can make a note in here, diminished, minor, 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 major, 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 minor, 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 and it's marked on the outside here, minor, major, diminished. And you can write it right in here if you want. But this shows you just how you can use the wheel to determine the chords in any given key, okay? Okay, I paused for a minute to get a drink of water to help my voice. One of the things I didn't mention in the beginning, I need to mention now. One of the reasons that it's called, the main reason that it's called the circle of fifths, because as you look around the circle, you'll see that the next note or the next note name or chord name or key name is going to be 1/5 up. Now, we talked about intervals. So the interval on the keyboard from C to G is a fifth, okay? Circle of fifths. We go up by a fifth from G and we get a D. We go up a fifth from D and we get an A. We go up a fifth from A and we get an E, and so forth, okay? On the other side of things, to the left, which is the flats keys, we go down a fifth and we get an F. We go down a fifth again, we get a B flat. We go down another fifth and we get an E flat. We go down another fifth and we get an A flat. Now, I was asked a question, well, why is it called the circle of fourths? Okay. The circle of fifths is the normal way we count things. However, if you decide you don't want to go backwards on the wheel, when you get to the flat scale, and you say, in other words, here we're counting up a fifth. If you're going to go this way and you're going to count up instead of down, from C to F is a fourth, okay? From F to B flat is another fourth. From B flat to E flat is a fourth, if you're looking at my fingers on the keyboard. From E flat to A flat is the fourth. From A flat to D flat is a fourth. And from D flat to G flat is a fourth. So that's where you get circle of fourths, circle of fifths. But normally I just keep it all in fifths, so I count up when I'm going this way, I count down when I'm going that way. You can choose whichever way is easier for you. Okay, so another thing that this circle will do, I mean, you might find it's easier just to do this yourself than figure it out in the circle of fifths, but it will quickly help you find your major and minor intervals from any given note if you're confused about what they are. Now remember, my method of counting included all of the notes, and I always told you that a major third was 5. Complete, it uses 5 notes or 5 semitones from beginning to end, and a minor third uses 4. So if we're going to do that, let's say we're going to start with C, and we're not sure, we should be sure up at this point, but we're not. So we're saying, okay, we're going to start with a C, and we have no idea what the major third is going to be. But remember, I told you 5 half steps, so let's count the notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That means it's an E. Okay? Now, by the same token, if I'm going to count flats, I'm going to find a minor. I'm going to find the minor third. We're going to go to the left to find the minor third, and we said it was 4, so we're going to count 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, including the C, including the first note and the last note, the 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, so it's E flat. Okay, now so we have the first 2 notes. We either have the first 2 notes of a C minor chord or the first 2 notes, C and E, of the C major chord. So all we need now is the fifth. Well, since the circle is arranged in fifths, we know that the next note to the C is going to be the fifth. So we have the C, we found the E, and then we have the G. Okay, so now if that is confusing to you, it might just be easier for you to count on the keyboard, but you can find it using this circle by counting the same system of counting that I did on the keyboard. If you don't have a keyboard in front of you, some of you may not, and you're trying to figure out, well, I have to figure out this chord so I can find a note to play. You might be a horn player. You might not be working from a keyboard. You might be a guitar player and have no clue because you're not working with a keyboard around you. So this method of finding the major and minor chords, main chords, will help you, because just remember, I told you to remember 2 numbers, 4 and 5. 4 half steps total for a minor third and 5 half steps total for a major third, because remember, your chord is composed of a 1, a third, and a fifth, and those are interval names. A 1, 3, 5, the intervals. So if you do not have the keyboard in front of you and you have a copy of the circle of fifths, you can construct your chords. Now this may take a little bit of thought, learning to use it that way, but it can be done starting on any note that you're in. So if, say you're in the key of D, okay, and you want to make a D major chord. So now we said the third is going to be 5 half steps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it means it's going to be an F sharp. You're in sharps. So it's going to be a D, then an F sharp. And it has to have a fifth. The fifth is going to be the next because these are 5 apart. So there's your D major chord. Okay, so D minor, we're going to go the opposite way, and we're going to count 4 half steps. 4 half steps to the left. 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's D. 1, 2, 3, 4, then F. And then, of course, once again, you still have the fifth. So D minor, D major. It's just easier once you find the major to go to the minor. Just remember, there's the only difference between a major chord and a minor chord is the third of the chord. And it's going to be either, this is minor, and you raise it 1 half step, you raise the third, 1 half step to make it major, or if you're in a major, you take the third of the chord, you lower it 1 half step. That's the only difference between the two. Okay. So now, if you're drawing your own circle, say you forgot to bring it with you, and you don't have it there, and you're at church, you're somewhere, and you're like, oh, grief, I didn't bring my circle of fifths, and I can't remember all this stuff. If you want to start constructing the circle of fifths, remember that C is at 12 o'clock, and that the 4 chord and the 5 chord are to either side of it. And if you look down the left side, you see the word bead, B-E-A-D, spelled here. If you look on the right side, you see the word bead spelled here. So you have bead here and bead here, F-C-G, and then on the bottom, you just have to do the G and F and just these 2 here. So you've got most of it, I'm sorry, just 1. You have 1 here. You have the C, the G flat, and bead, bead. That'll help you construct the circle very quickly if you happen to not have it with you and you just have a sheet of paper and you just need a little bit of help. That's just a memory tool, okay? So you just look for the word bead on both sides. Reads this way, just going around the circle. The C's at the top with its 2 chords on either side, the F and G, and then you have a G flat at the bottom, and then you can construct your circle. Okay. The other thing that the circle of fifths can show you is the keys that are closest to the key you are playing in. So now, why is this helpful? This is helpful for modulating, or if you want to borrow chords from a nearby key. So the key names to the immediate left and right of any given note, say you're in the key of C, so your key name to the right is G, your key name to the left is F, okay? F and G are the closest keys to the key of C. And if you look on your keyboard, you will see one of the things that helps make them close is that they share chords. There's a lot of chords they share. So if you're in the key of C, it has an F chord in it. It also has a G chord in it. If you're in the key of G, it has a C chord in it, as well as the D, okay? So it shares notes or chords from the opposite key. And also, the closer that it is on the wheel, the easier it is to get to in modulation, because we talked about using the 5-7, the dominant 7th chords as your tool for modulating, if you don't want to go through a lot of different chords in between. So now, if you look at the wheel, say we have G over here and we have A flat down here. The fact that they're so far apart, almost the opposite sides of the wheel, from G to D flat or G to A flat, tells you it's going to be a little bit harder to modulate from G to the key of A flat or from G to the key of D flat. You're going to have to go through a few more chord progressions to get there and to make it smooth. So if you're going to modulate, one of the things that I see is we take a song and we go through a lot of like "This is the day the Lord has made," and we go through key after key after key. We generally modulate to either a half step or a step up or down, either way, as we're moving up the keyboard, so that we don't have a major problem in establishing the tonality of that key to our singers. So we try to keep the next key as close as we can to the key we just left, and people can easily hear it. Okay? So that's an idea for you if you are working and you're playing and they want to modulate to another key. Pick a key that is close on the wheel, okay? And you will find it much easier to modulate between them. Okay, the circle can also show you the most probable resolution for the dominant seventh chord. And we did a previous lesson on dominant seventh chords, like this one. Okay? And you know that they need to be resolved because they leave you hanging. Unless you're doing jazz. You know, jazz and blues tend to stay on seventh chords and go from seventh chord to seventh chord. They're not resolving because they are using these as part of, this is just the sequences in jazz music and in blues music. But if you're a church musician, chances are you're not doing a lot of jazz and blues. You're doing church music, which tends to be a little bit different, more practical maybe. That's probably not wrong term, practical. But when we do a seventh in most of our chords, we have to resolve it, okay? So look at the wheel and take any note on the wheel. Let's, in this case, take a G. Turn it into, add the minor seventh, turn it into a seventh chord. Now you're going to look, here's G. Look to the immediate left of that note. We just did a G7 chord, G minor 7. That is the most likely resolution. So if we're on a G7, G7 to C, okay? So the wheel will help you find the most likely resolution for a dominant seventh chord, which we did a whole lesson on them. We talked about the need to resolve them. So if you're still confused about where to go, so this will even help you in your resolutions. Okay, so if you know that the G7 is going to resolve to the C, that's the way to get there. So we know that this is the chord you need to use. So if we are modulating between keys, and all we have to do is say, okay, I am trying to get to the key of F. So what chord would I have to use to modulate to get there? Well, it's the chord to the immediate right, C. Make that a dominant seventh. So if you have a C7 chord, it resolves to an F. Okay, you can go around the wheel and you can do that. So if you're on a seventh already, C7, go to an F. But if you just look at the key you want to get to and look to the chord immediately to the right, or the letter name to the immediate right, make it a minor seventh or dominant seventh, and that will get you to that key. So we talked about that, and the chord wheel will show you how to do that. Now, there's a lot of other uses, and we could be here all day probably coming out with other uses, and you can probably find other ways to use it as you start using the circle of fifths. But I want to take a few minutes to talk about the chord wheel. One of the things that's nice about this is that it does some of the things we just talked about, and because it adds a few extra rows. Now it's got the minors here, it's got the majors here, and this little part goes around. Okay, so now let's look at this in relationship to the things that we just covered on the circle of fifths. Up in here, you see this big outline. I'll pull it up so you can kind of see it. Okay, it's got an outline. And that sits on the wheel and it moves as you move it. So let's start at the top. Now, it's a little bit different in that it doesn't have I don't see the minor things on here, the same as on here. Okay, so the inner wheel on this is actually all your major chords. So let's look at the C chord for instance. Okay, it outlines it and shows you. Okay, it's showing it over here. Nope. Okay, shows you the 4 chord and the 5 chord. So you have those two. Here's your 3 major chords. Then above it on the wheel are your 3 minor chords in that key, which in this case are the D minor, E minor, A minor, and the 1 diminished chord in that key, which is B diminished. So if we move to the key of G, let's go here. Okay, so we see that the 4 chord is a C, the 5 chord is a D. The 3 minor chords in that key are an A minor, B minor, and E minor, and the diminished chord is an F sharp diminished. As you work around the wheel, on the chord wheel, it has these highlighted and outlined. Okay, so they're already there for you. Okay, so the other thing that it's got on here, we talked about secondary dominant chords. Now they have marked them. So in this case, there is an E. I'm having trouble reading it, okay? The E, which is a 3 chord, we're in the key of C again. We're back here, okay? The E, they have it marked here, 3, which is a 5 of 6 chord, okay? They're showing you that chord here. And of course, you're going to make it major. Because remember, we take the minor chord and we make it major, and that becomes the 5 of the secondary dominant. So they're showing you that, okay? The other thing it shows is the 5 of 5 chord. That's part of the outline on here. If you're seeing, I'm trying to get the camera so it can pick these up. You may not be able to see that, but it's marked, okay? It's part of the outline of the part that moves. And right here, after we've done these 7 chords that are the major ones, then we have the 5 of 5 chord, which is a major 2, and we have the 5 of 6 chord, which is a major 3. Now there's only one other secondary dominant which is not used as often, but it shows you that. Okay, so as you move this, okay, it shows you just different things up in here that as you move this. This is if this helps you here, to show you what it's outlining, okay? And what they do for the key signature, instead of on the outside of the wheel, as we had here, remember we had the key signatures marked on the outside of the wheel? They have the key signature marked on the inside of the wheel. So because we're in the key of C on this first one up here, there's nothing. We move to the key of G. We center this on with G. See, it's marked, it says key, and this is a 1 chord. This is marked the 4 chord. This is marked the 5, the 2, 3, the 6, and the 7, and they're showing you the key signature is 1 sharp. And as you move around the wheel, it'll show you all that. It'll help you in your transposition as you go through this book. It'll explain each part of it, show you sample progressions of chords, give you hints on transpositions, how to transpose using the wheel, helping you when you're in composition. Because if you are, say you're writing a song and you want to do it in such and such a key, oh, let's go over here and do it in the key of B flat. Okay, here's B flat. This is the key. I'm in the key of B flat, and I want to know, oh my goodness, what chords can I use for this song? Remember, we talked about, when I was talking about playing by ear, that any major song, or any song, minor, major song, whatever, can be harmonized using 3 basic chords, the 1 chord, the 4 chord, the 5 chord. We mentioned that. But you may be bored with those chords, and you say, I want to go somewhere else well, let's go to the key of B flat, for instance. Okay, so we know that in the key of B flat, we have the 1 chord, which is B flat. We have the 4 chord, which is Z flat, and we have the 5 chord, which is F. Okay, now we know we can harmonize a song using those, but there's 3 minor chords and a diminished chord as well. And then if you're looking out advanced on the wheel, it gives you the 5 of 5 chord, and it gives you the 5 of 6 chord, which are both secondary dominants. So now, without even thinking about it, you've got them marked here for you, so you know, oh, these are all the various chords I can use in this key. In addition, we can look to the left and to the right at some close chords from some other keys. If we can borrow some chords from over here, the key of F, or maybe we can borrow some chords from over here, the key of E flat. But this chord wheel, because it has this wheel and it moves this inner circle, or this circle around that has the markings. I don't know if these markings are getting picked up. I'm trying to get it up so you can see the markings. It's almost like you took a magic marker and you wrote on this wheel, but you see those markings. They move with this plastic. They move with the plastic, and the part that stays the same is the bottom of the wheel that's drawn there. Okay, and this part moves, and it's the part that moves that will help you find things. So we're going to kind of end the lesson there. I'm going to recommend the chord wheel to you if you have a spare $15, which is about what it's going to cost you with shipping. And you get that and read through it and practice with it and try using it with your instrument and see where it takes you, especially if you are doing any composing, if you're doing any modulating, if you're trying to take a song that has some boring chords in it and you want to get some ideas of other places that you can go or other chords that you can use, but you just don't have enough skill or enough understanding of keys to know what chords are available, then something like the chord wheel and the circle of fifths can help you there. Please feel free to leave comments on my YouTube page here where when you listen to this lesson. Leave questions, leave comments, and if you leave questions, I definitely will make an effort to get back to you and answer them. But thank you for joining me today. That ends today's lesson. I hope you have learned something, and I hope that you'll start using the circle of fifths and possibly the chord wheel. And as an aside, I'm not making any money if you buy the chord wheel. Believe me, I'm not selling it. I just happened to find it online and purchased it for my own use. So it's out there, and you'll find there's many lessons online about the circle of fifths. You might even want to go to some of those and read them, download some more information or download some more examples of how you can use the circle of fifths. But jump in with both feet and try it, and I think you'll progress, and it'll help you tremendously. So God bless. Have a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you all later.